Good afternoon, everybody. If you're coming into the session, may I please ask you to make your way inside the hall? We're literally going to start the session in the next 2 minutes. Thank you. Well, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, thank you so much for joining us for this Africa Green Hydrogen Alliance showcase. Now, it's a showcase for many reasons, and I'm sure you're already anticipating us. As you see us perched on these chairs, you're thinking, which one of them is going to fall off first? But I don't think it's going to happen yet, because we've all promised that the entertainment will keep to as minimum as possible. But one of the panelists said it was, a good analogy on some of the challenges that you face on this journey. You rise and you fall. So if we do that, I think it's by pure illustration of some of the challenges that I face. My name is Tshepiso Magwetla. I will be your moderator today. So I'm just going to recap some of the points that were made during the opening session about the fact that this Africa Green Hydrogen Alliance summit this particular year has a very pan-African approach that members are going to showcase the flagship projects that they have in terms of their unique offerings, spotlighting opportunities for domestic value creation. And of course, the speakers here are also going to profile some of their key projects. We'll also just look back on some of the points raised by the Minister as well as the Premier, Mr. Alan Winde, and just the whole fact that this is the first time that South Africa itself is assuming the chairmanship of the Africa Green Hydrogen Alliance, and that the request is to make the circle bigger, as you heard Mr. Masopa during the session. Well, this is part of the entertainment I was speaking about. So we'll be dropping things, picking them up, and getting the contestants to hand them over to me. So I hope you understand that. So as Mr. Masopa was saying, Namibia is hoping that it's going to host the summit so that we ensure that there is an understanding that more countries are involved. Some of them were named by the president earlier on. Egypt, we have Mauritania, Uganda, Kenya, so we'll be hearing more from them about that. But I just want to also emphasize on this point that global trade is key to unlocking the full potential of the green hydrogen market, supported by diversified transport infrastructure. I know this is one of the major points that's been spoken about. Alan Winde earlier on saying as a premier that South Africa is not falling asleep in terms of trailblazing efforts of being at the forefront of taking part in the low-hanging fruits available to coordinate, not only at a provincial level, at a national level as well, that there are finance instruments that they are looking at to ensure that everybody gets to play an important role. The president talking about trade and investment in energy as being very much interlinked, but saying that Namibia itself has a very advanced efforts in terms of green hydrogen power, but this is also a symbiotic relationship that was also undercut by, or rather underscored by Minister Kgosientsho Ramokgopa. So we're going to be going through a few number of key discussion points. I'll highlight them in just a moment, but let me just first introduce the panelists to you, and they will also give their opening statements, and then we're going to hand over to the floor. I know I'm supposed to take a lot of the time in terms of interacting with the panelists, asking questions. I will do that, but I'd like to open up the floor to that. So if you do have a question, please, show your hand. We'll get a microphone to you. And if I could just ask also as part of the house rules, please keep your phone on silent. introduce yourself, whom you want to pose a question to, so that we make this interesting. Not as interesting as I've already started to make it in terms of what we've illustrated, but you can try and top me with that. So let me introduce you to our panelists in no particular order. Mr. James Munyupe, who's the Green Hydrogen Commissioner and Presidential Economic Advisor, Office of the President of Namibia. Mr. Masopa Mushasho, you met him earlier on, Ministry Presidency of South Africa. And Joyce Kambui, the pretty lady in front of me, because she's prettier than the rest of the panelists. No? Yes? Okay, Joyce Kambui, Africa Manager in the Green Hydrogen Organization, Coordinator, Africa Green Hydrogen Alliance. I say pretty because we often give women the softer approach, and we spoke about representativity. So let's up the scales. Let's say we want more beauty and brains on the panels. Eric Mwangi is the Advisor, Executive Office of the President of Kenya. He'll also be joining the discussion. So it's a discussion amongst friends, and let me start with you, Eric, and there's a reason I say discussion amongst friends. Sorry, Mr. My apologies for that. Mr. Karumbali Leheb is the advisor in charge of upstream hydrocarbons, Ministry of Petroleum, Mines and Energy, Mauritania. It's because I'd mentioned Mauritania earlier on. My apologies. And most importantly, it's because I wanted to jump to the issue of friendship, because it's the strangest thing. I've known Eric for something like 20 years, and I didn't even know that we're going to bump into this, doing similar work. So as it was mentioned earlier on in the sessions, the work began, I think it was BMW that was saying that some of the work began a long time ago. So the interest is mounting, and the work is exponential. So let me just start then with you, Eric, to talk about Kenya's experience. Just tell us a little bit more about your flagship projects, if you can tell us about the significant progress that you've made and the unique opportunities that you're offering and the domestic value creation that you've seen.
Well, that's a lot. I think and perhaps this is one area where there's a bit of a distinction in terms of the approach that Kenya is taking. The starting point really has been the establishment of the ambition. So what is the ambition around renewables? Unlike South Africa with a 50 gigawatt system, Kenya is still a pretty small one. It's about 3 gigawatts, which means that, on one hand, the opportunity is obviously far larger than the current grid can support, but it also means that you're not shackled to legacy issues, so that you're not kind of focusing on fixing the utility before you can start taking advantage of the opportunities that things like green hydrogen present. But in terms of the ambition, I think it's been stated a few times over that the target is to get to 100 gigawatts by 2040. A good part of that is going to be driven by power to X, and this is everything from hydrogen to ammonia to synthetic fuels. What we are seeing happening is, unlike, I guess, Namibia and South Africa, and to some extent Mauritania, is a lot of the early efforts are private sector led. So we have a project in development now for 250,000 tons a year of green ammonia, private sector developed, self-funded, and didn't wait for a green hydrogen policy or strategy to be done, although one's been done now. But this has been in development for the last 18 months. There's another one that's about 300 megawatts, also targeting green ammonia. Both of these are looking at domestic demand. The most advanced one is a small one, which is a pilot project for 10 megawatts that is also doing ammonia for fertilizer. Now, this is in the context of a country that imports all its fertilizer. And so there's clearly a domestic use case there for replacing those imports. And it may possibly extend to a fuel substitution opportunity, because 25% of the capacity, installed capacity, which is about 800 megawatts, is run on on heavy fuel oil and diesel. And because now we're in a situation where you have turbines that can run on green ammonia or green methanol, we're seeing an opportunity there to do further substitution so that you can move from HFO and diesel into a synthetic fuel that's green, and that would bring forward the ambition of getting to 100% renewable by 2030, considerably up. So that's kind of at a high level the landscape that we see in Kenya.
So, James, the whole issue of feasibility studies was mentioned by your minister earlier on, but the issue of standardization was also raised, whether we all have the same understanding of what green hydrogen energy is. From a regional perspective, I'd imagine that there would be a more alliance in thinking. But if we have a broader strategy, just tell me about your experiences when you're dealing with the region and the partnerships that you already have internationally. Are these some of the issues that come up as challenges?
Yeah, they are, and this is why we value, I think, the work that Joyce and the Green Hydrogen Organization and actually the African Green Hydrogen Alliance is doing quite a lot. And you know, there's a conversation that needs to happen, yes, amongst us as potential producers, but you also have to have a conversation with the consumers. And this is why at the moment, I think what Tom was mentioning on stage, we are working closely with the COP presidency to try and announce an initiative in Dubai that is going to encourage harmonization of certification for these products. So at the moment, we're seeing a big range of, if just one item that is typically used to define green hydrogen is the amount of carbon dioxide that is emitted in producing the molecules. And we've seen numbers all the way from 1 kilogram all the way to 4 kilograms. Some people are talking about green hydrogen, others are talking about clean hydrogen. But if there isn't a common approach to defining the product, it'll also be quite hard to market the product, right? Because you know, there's a reason OPEC exists. So, but the utility in us talking to one another as producers is very important, because when the standards are being set, say, for example, by Europe, by the EU Commission, in conjunction with Hydrogen Europe and others, they may not know Mr. Mwangi's conditions in Kenya as well as Mr. Mwangi, right? In terms of when we're looking to produce green hydrogen in Mauritania, South Africa, or Namibia, what are the conditions that we have to endure in order to produce that molecule? So some people are thinking of tapping into the grid a little bit in order to optimize electrolyzer feasibility and to reduce the levelized cost of ammonia. And as the developers are trying to fine-tune the makeup of their systems, they're looking for guidance to say, how much carbon dioxide can I afford? And you know, I think Mauritania is ahead of all of us at the moment. They've actually started producing their draft green hydrogen code as a legislation in Namibia. The developers are looking to us to say, what do you define as green hydrogen in our countries? And as you heard in Kenya, for example, all of that is private sector led. So we haven't yet really wrapped our heads around this issue. And I think sooner rather than later, that is an issue that can easily unite us in conversation to say, colleagues, what's going on in your neighborhood and our neighborhood, and what should we jointly lobby to the world as at least a starting point, a departure point of acceptable quantities of either carbon dioxide, temporal matching. They're looking as well at things like additionality. These are all categories of items that consumers are looking to get to in order, before they say this is green hydrogen. Because of course, at the end of the day, they have to justify the premium price for this product to their end consumers and to their governments as well. So that's an interesting one.
So, you know, Minister Ramokgopa just did mention that we're looking at leveraging the benefits for social development, ensuring that we use the premium price that, say, the North is willing to pay for the benefit of our people. But Joyce, just listening now to James, I'm just thinking in terms of integration, the issue that he raised, maybe think about the EPAs. We know that there's a self-interest, there's sovereignty, there's nationhood, even though we want to work as a region. And there are a lot of other areas. So how do you navigate all of that, existing industries with those that you are now trying to bring onto the mainstream to achieve green hydrogen energy?
We can say what the starting point is this, the collaboration and these partnerships that we're having. So having this conversation that we have both formally and informally as friends, like you already mentioned, since we meet quite a bit. So we're doing quite a bit of studies as the Africa Green Hydrogen Alliance. So looking at, for example, markets, previous conversations have really just focused on Europe, Korea, Japan, which have been identified as critical markets for the hydrogen that will be produced in Africa. But we're also saying, let's shift the narrative. Where are the domestic opportunities, and how do we also trade this as a region? So for instance, Morocco, they're also members of the alliance, and they announced an electrolyzer manufacturing plant there. So how can the other countries that are members of the alliance, for instance, 5 years down the line, once these projects come online, how do we benefit from having an electrolyzer plant in Morocco or in South Africa or in Kenya or Namibia, something like that? How do we share some of these technologies to make sure then the sector is growing up fast? And that's what it exists. And like James mentioned, that Mauritania is already working on the green hydrogen regulation. Kenya has reached out to say, can Mauritania share their draft so that we see, once we get started on ours, so that we know what's the guidelines, as well as standards and certification, which is also something we're working on. This needs to be sovereign. So countries need to really define what certification means at a national level. So the emissions calculation, are you adhering to SDGs? Because at least you must be contributing to sustainable development goals as well, and also environmental and social governance. So this is the platform that we create to share this information, and also conducting analyses as a group. And we hope that by COP we'll be doing another study that's particularly looking at industries, just really mapping who are these off-takers for the hydrogen that will be produced in Africa. So really getting down to the actual products that we'll be buying.
So let's hear from you, Mr. Kumbuleli Lechid. Am I saying it correctly? Lechid. Okay. What are the lessons that you've learned in coming up with a regulation framework? And I also want you to reflect on the alliance itself, because as you build policy, you are also taking into account the partnerships that you're working on, and looking at the incentives that you can also then offer your people in Mauritania.
Thank you very much. Even though the colleagues consider that we have achieved a lot of progress in this regulation, I think we are just in a starting point, because we just now have a first draft we shared with our private partner, and of course we'll be happy to share the lesson learned after consultation with the private sector, with other AGHA members. And we have already learned a lot from them in the discussion around how we can do some kind of standardization, of course, some kind of how we can negotiate agreement with the private sector, because Mauritania is, we are focusing our effort to attract investors, because we think that the capacity that we have, it needs a lot of investment in order to make it happen. We have more than 400, in our estimation, 400 giga possibility of renewable, co-located sun and wind, and with iron also possibility to run it through, which is one of the opportunity that we want to focus the investment in it in Mauritania, but also in the sub-region. And if there is any integration between the African countries, we are very happy to work on that, to accelerate that for this type of infrastructure and this type of industry, like green steel, green DRI, and green, all the value chain of the green hydrogen.
So, Mr. Moshoeshoe, let me come to you. You heard Minister Ramokgopa speak earlier on about obviously the focus being trade and investment, but that there is a binational commission, South Africa and Namibia. Let's just start with that. And against that, talk about the alliance at large, because I'm thinking about investment enablers here. What are we offering? Who's offering what from a South African point of view? From the presidency, what are you looking at? If we're talking about saying we're looking for excess energy, then, it's a give and take.
Sure. The Binational Commission is interesting in the sense that...
Can we just get him a little bit more? Let's speak and let's see how that goes.
Maybe I can...
Okay, so I don't know if your battery is off, but while we fix that, for those of you who may not have been in the room, just to let you know, we're going to have a question and answer session just after the colleagues speak. You can please bring the microphone.
You can use
The organizer does not have a voice. How does that work? Okay.
Okay.
It'll give me a...
Yep,
That's fine.
that's
That's fine.
the-
It'll give you a
That's
reason to incentivize somebody to work on.
Give me an opportunity to move my chair further from the edge of the a few things. The Binational Commission really is an expression of the closeness of the relationship between ourselves and Namibia. It stems across multiple areas, from agriculture to health to education, and energy being a subcomponent of that. From a broader energy perspective, there's already interdependence between our countries. We supply approximately 100 megawatts to Namibia. So in that sense, we are two brothers tied at the hip, which is what I think our president described us as. So there's definitely a regional play, and in many instances, international markets see us in a regional manner. The broader alliance is interesting in the sense that it gives us an opportunity to have an element of supply-side coordination, which in many instances is sorely lacking. We dance to the tune of the demand side. Those who will be buying specify what is green hydrogen and the parameters that it must meet. And it's an interesting element around how we begin to influence that. So I'm not sure, let's say, what the sort of economic status is of many of our partner countries, but as a South African economy, the fiscus is relatively tapped. So the opportunity for large-scale financial incentives is limited. Really where we're sort of bringing our value add is in terms of creating the enabling environment from a regulatory perspective, but also the opportunity for linkages for our developers to offtake markets, to technology partners, to financiers. And many of the elements around sort of the development of a nascent economy are ones that are not specific only to South Africa. The certification one is an interesting one, and a number of the colleagues have spoken to that. It will impact whether or not there is a green hydrogen economy in many of the countries that you have around the table. Kenya, for instance, is very fortunate in terms of having an energy mix which is more than 90% renewables. And that's obviously something that we are all aiming to be able to attain, given the very real impacts of climate change and the opportunities that the green transition offers. But there also needs to be a pathway for those that are fossil fuel heavy and fossil fuel dependent to be able to transition. So those are some of the technical elements that our colleagues were speaking about around additionality, around temporal allocation, around all of these elements. So I think the opportunity for a combined voice to really put forward the just component of this transition. How do we enable those that are fossil fuel dependent to be able to transition is a key element to this. So unfortunately, it's not one of money everywhere. It's that's very much an American approach at the moment, which is fantastic and will leverage off of the gains that they make from bringing that. But ours, I think, is going to be a bit more of a nuanced approach and needs to be.
I wanted to ask, and perhaps we can also talk about this with other countries as well, but James, let me start with you. When we talk about South Africa, Namibia, the issue of shared infrastructure, perhaps you could just talk to us, the audience, about what you're looking at so far. I mean, we spoke about the investment in corridors, but from a practical point of view, what are we looking at? Because not all of us are technocrats and understand what is involved here.
So very practically speaking, you've got the largest consumer of gray hydrogen on the continent next door. Yeah, and it's not a country, it's a customer, it's a client, it's Sasol, right? So if you're also building one of the largest sub-Saharan producers of green hydrogen right next door, it behooves you to explore the potential that that proximity generates from an African continental free trade agreement area at the very least, all the way to decarbonization of the continent and integrating socioeconomic development between these two countries, right? So I think that's what makes Namibia and South Africa potentially interesting from a producer perspective. Kenya, as you heard, at the moment might be sort of really looking at consuming a lot of the molecules. The northern part might be exporting some, but you would consume some as well for iron ore. But so that's one. So, but to get the molecule from Lüderitz to Buchubai and all the way to Secunda, the most efficient way to transport hydrogen is via a pipeline. But that pipeline would need to start in one country and end up in another, or join. So we can again learn from our brothers and sisters in the north. They're building a 20,000 to 30,000 hydrogen backbone, kilometer backbone within Europe. And to do that, they're coordinating that effort across various countries. So that's one easy one. Let's coordinate a hydrogen backbone between the two countries, and this is something that as governments we've now agreed to do, and I think we'll reveal more details, I think, by COP. But you also heard the minister talking about strengthening our transmission lines. If you looked at one of his Ds, he was talking about digitalization to allow the electrons to flow both ways. At the moment, we import a lot of electricity from South Africa. At some point in time, it would be amazing if we're able to generate enough here and sell. So transmission lines would be another one. We're also looking at developing green corridors, maritime corridors. So that is, you might generate molecules or build products that can be transported from Walvis Bay and Lüderitz to Saldanha and other ports in Buchubai in South Africa, or the other way around. So we're exploring what is the most efficient way. We don't have enough iron ore like Mauritania. We have some, but South Africa has a whole bunch. At the moment, we're trucking in manganese. Could we ship some of this ore, whether it's iron ore or manganese, to Namibia, get it received at some of our ports? Or is it that we're importing electrolyzers? That might be, manufactured elsewhere. And then the last one that is very important is, of course, the road network. We have a really decent road network between South Africa and Namibia as exists already. But now it is to leverage that road network and to put enabling infrastructure like hydrogen service stations that allow for, zero, or at least decarbonizing long-haul trucking, right? Which is obviously another one of those hard-to-abate sectors. So those are 4 pieces of infrastructure that will interconnect neighbors in one way or another, that then enable, right, for the optimization of the opportunity at hand. Yeah.
So let me ask you first, because you're already in the regulating phase of your policy framework. Land tenure consequences, is this a challenge that you have come up against? I don't know if you do have countries, neighbors, or people that you do share infrastructure with.
I think this sharing infrastructure, in our view, not only regionally, even inside the country, we are trying in our legislation or regulation now to encourage and put a way clearly between the developer to share the infrastructure, because the country is quite wide, and of course there is an opportunity to link it in the southern side. Already, Mauritania is already electricity, in the electricity we are already linked to the West Africa pool, and in the north there is a possibility to link it with Morocco. So, but even inside the country, we think that there is a lot of advantage for the instead of each project to work alone without considering any optimization with others, to share some infrastructure. For example, desalination, which will be some of the big component in this project. They can share desalination for the port, for example, exportation port or importation port. They can enhance one of the port and put it as a hub of the green hydrogen import of equipment or export of the ammonia, which is one of the main derivative of the green hydrogen that we are thinking about. So it's even internally, it has a very good sense, this sharing infrastructure. But we have to make sure that we don't create a lot of obligation to make the project on project risk, to make everyone depending on the other one. So that's something also we have to think about it during this infrastructure encouraging procedure or regulation. Yes.
Look, I see you nodding your head. Do you want to add something to that? The considerations that maybe you're having the discussions in country about these consequences and how to navigate that.
No, I think the reality is, as much as nascent as green hydrogen is, you require infrastructure. You're going to need more transmission. Already, I think, we've seen as investment has gone into generation, there's been a lag in funding transmission. I think Kenya is probably going to do the first privately funded transmission line, hopefully during the course of 2024. And that's being done through Africa 50 and Power Grid of India. And we expect that as there's more kind of power to X projects coming on stream, that the investment in transmission starts to become almost like a standalone business case, because you have large consumers on one hand, you have large generators on the other, and you can bypass the existing grid and get the electrons where they need to go for the production of green hydrogen. So just kind of reflecting on some similarities there between Kenya and Mauritania.
Joyce, and this is something that, Masako, you can also comment on, but I'd just like to hear from you, as in you from a South African perspective, but Joyce, I'd like to hear from the work that you've done. If we're talking about some of these challenges, these issues, Minister Ramkhopa said earlier on that it's important that we all have a discussion about the economy which we envisage. So all of this, the knowledge transfer aspect of it in terms of community benefit, what can be done right now and just going forward, maybe from what you've seen done better?
Contracting is something that really needs to be done right from the start. And one of the things that we are saying is governments really understanding what you're signing when you're doing these deals with the private sector, and this is one of the things to consider. And it's up now to the government side to ensure then that you're protecting the interests of communities and citizens where these projects will be developed. And looking at the project sites, most of them will be areas where it's either quite rural in a sense, and low population, low literacy levels. So it's also when we're planning these projects, really outlining these benefits. And we're already seeing that the green hydrogen economy, at least in the AGHA member countries, is already will increase GDP between 6 and 12% between 2030 and 2050, when we're anticipating most of the projects to come online. So we can already understand that there will be quite some significant socioeconomic benefits from the green hydrogen investments that will be made in these countries. So the way we do contracts is really important, that we ensure that we're getting it right. And one of the things that we are saying, and we will soon be launching a guide on local content to consider for green hydrogen. And this is really picking lessons from the oil and gas and mining sectors and saying mistakes that were made, how do we ensure that we rectify? So picking a few case studies, best practices from these countries, and then using this guide as something that then countries can adopt for their own use.
Okay, I'm going to ask if we get a roving mic to the floor. So while we do that, please indicate if you have a question to ask. Then, Masopa, you can just respond to... Oh, okay, I wanted you to respond to that question from a South African point of view. Are we really mic poverty? Okay.
You can tell you're the
I was
organizer.
ready to.
To be the roving mic. Okay, so you can just go ahead and then we'll make sure that we do get a microphone to the gentleman here in front. I can even hop off and do it, but go ahead, please.
Yeah, you're good.
You're good.
Is it on?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so from a South African perspective, I think it's worth painting a picture of the economy that we have. And that is one which is very fossil fuel intensive. 80% of our energy comes from fossil fuel sources. It has a significant impact on our ability potentially to export in the future. Things like carbon border adjustment mechanisms are a real risk to our economy. So green hydrogen and the green transition is more around our ability to be able to continue to export to developed economies while at the same time transitioning our existing economies. So we really see green hydrogen as an opportunity to link our renewable energy endowment with our mineral endowment. Maybe to respond to some of the things that the colleagues were saying is that even though there's significant opportunity for partnership and collaboration, we are at different stages. We, as South Africa, have a very complicated and deep capital markets. We have a very established services sector. So some of the challenges that some of the partner countries may face may be slightly different to ours in terms of the ability to enter on an equal footing into negotiations with partner countries and developed economies and others. So it's that element and opportunity for learning among ourselves before sort of going out.
At its full throttle.
The economy that we'd like to see, though, is one where we are exporting less energy, even if it's green energy, as an energy form alone, but to beneficiate it together with our other endowments and to use our industrial base to produce value-added products. That's the way in which we embed the benefit of the green transition and really take communities along with us.
Okay, so we're going to take the next 15 minutes for question and answers. So, President earlier on mentioned something about being energized. I was hoping you were going to give me some of that. No? Okay. Right, we have a question here, so please identify yourself, and if there's anybody in particular you'd like to pose a question to, please also.
Thank you very much. My name is Ernst Müller. I'm a lawyer with Herbert Smith Freehills, and I have the pleasure of working very closely with Joyce Kabui from the Africa Green Hydrogen Alliance, and also do a lot of advisory work for the Green Hydrogen Organization. One of the comments made by the panel fascinated me, and it's in relation to emission reduction thresholds that you will meet in order to sell your products, and how we must be conscious of operating environments across Africa and how that differs from the markets in the north. So part of the work that I do with the Green Hydrogen Organization is on the Standards Committee, where we think about what that threshold should look like and under which circumstances hydrogen should be classified as green or grey or anything else in the rainbow spectrum. And interestingly enough, the standard that the Green Hydrogen Organization is considering, which of course will feed into certification and then will meet the requirements of the financial institutions that will fund these projects, the threshold is a lot lower at this point in time than it would be in relation to, for example, with Europe, which allows more carbon dioxide to be emitted. Now, in this whole world where we're racing towards COP28, my question to you is, if the world is thinking green, but we're also thinking just energy transition, what does it mean in real terms if we say that Africa must be allowed to transition in circumstances where we want to market and sell hydrogen as green?
Yep.
Joyce, I think it's a very interesting question. Would you like to answer that while we wait for another question? Okay, we have one here, then 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay.
I think it's actually maybe I can just comment because, and this is something that surfaced very clearly in the Africa Climate Summit held in Nairobi in September this year. That it's the strategy for South Africa, for Nigeria, for Mauritania, for Namibia, on a national level, the context, the resource availability, the economic conditions, the political conditions are so very different that to kind of present an Africa strategy for green hydrogen is a tough ask, because what role is it playing for your economy? So for Kenya, for instance, we don't have the legacy issue that South Africa has. And so perhaps we can think a little bit kind of, plain white piece of paper and start from scratch, and work from there. So, and it, then it's net additive to the economy, because you're creating industries that did not exist before. You're not substituting anything out. And so, the lens through which you need to look at this is to find, so what are the common, areas? What common ground do you have? And what common positions can you take on specific things? And you can't begrudge Nigeria or South Africa or Algeria saying, hey, we can't jump from 0 to 100. We've got a few million jobs to worry about in the interim, and we need to think about how we transition in a fair way to where the world needs to get to. So I think you need to think about it a bit more contextually from a national point of view. Not everybody's has the same challenges.
I think it's a very interesting point. Do you want to comment on it, Masopa? Because I think it's something that I did raise earlier on in relation to the EPAs, for instance. And when we were transitioning from the MDs to the SDGs, this was one of the major issues, that you're starting off a very different base, country, yet you have a common goal.
Sure. I think in a South African context, it also gives us some element of focus. Why do we take certain industries along this journey with us? Because there's very real consequence for them not transitioning. If Sasol has a discussion around green hydrogen, it is existential. Whereas many others, it is something much more peripheral. So the impact of not bringing a new economy, a new opportunity, is a very real loss of skills, livelihoods, and economy in places like Sasolburg, which are named after Sasol, and Secunda, which is a much larger industrial complex. So that element of this transition and creating the ability for fossil fuel intensive economies to transition is something that we are all wrestling with in one manner or another. Some of us don't have the sort of legacy issues that a South Africa has, and by extension a Namibia has, through just the mix of the energy that we use. But this is something that we need to consider as we speak about this just element of a transition. How do you ensure that there is no green fudging or elements where we are selling sort of dirty hydrogen as green hydrogen? So we want that element of the certification to be 100% clear. We want elements around additionality. We shouldn't be using renewable energy meant for other parts of our economies to now produce green hydrogen, so there should be that element of additionality. I don't think we see a challenge with that. But how do we ensure that we integrate the green hydrogen discussion into the broader electricity discussion in some of our countries that have dirty grids? And that's a discussion that we're all wrestling with.
Okay, so I'm going to take the next 3 questions so that we can also give everybody else an opportunity to speak. The gentleman over here, please introduce yourself, and then we'll come here, and then to the gentleman there, and the one behind.
Thank you very much. My name is Innocent Angura. environmental scientist from Namibia and researcher as well. My question is in terms of whether there is a clear division of roles in the trade or transactions envisaged within the African Alliance context on green hydrogen. The understanding at the moment is that there is clarity on that in terms of what Europe expects to consume from the producer countries in Africa. Is there a similar discussion within the Africa Green Hydrogen Alliance in that respect, in terms of which country is going to be producing what, who's going to buy what from whom? Thank you very much.
Thank you. If we can just please give the microphone to the gentleman in front here.
Hi, my name is Jin, and then I'm the board member of the Africa Energy Chambers, and then I'm also doing my own energy industry in South Africa and Namibia. So I have a question, Mr. Masopa. For the first, there is a big hot place as a hydrogen project in Namibia. So I travel with the Energy Ministry and then NIPDB to Korea together, and then we visit big companies which is the more focus on the hydrogen side. So, to expose a big opportunity for production hydrogen from Namibia. And then Namibia government did the MOU with Japan. So as I know Mr. James, that's why he always travel in the world. So he's a so busy man.
No, he is a globetrotter. You're right.
Yeah, everybody wants to meet Mr. James. Yes. So regarding over the South Africa, is it also looking for the Asia country to collaborate for hydrogen side? We, especially Korea and Japan, our technique is high advanced at the moment. So I just want to hear. So I sometimes discuss with Priscilla from the Sasser, but she also very busy. So I didn't get the proper answer at every time. But I want to hear from your opinion.
Thank you, Judge. So to the gentleman there and we'll come to you. I know it should be ladies first.
Good afternoon.
Yeah.
Good afternoon. Sorry, I hope it was for me.
No, yes, it's for you.
Nicolas Lecomte, Hyderogen de France. My question is, if the Africa Green Hydrogen Alliance, what is the momentum about extending the group to other countries? And I would attach an element to my question is that there is countries in West Africa that does not benefit from the good combination of wind, solar, and water. That could actually be, if the current country are typically more producers, looking at exporting to Europe in particular. What about the West Africa and extending the group to them? Green hydrogen by Africa for Africa.
I don't speak French, so I'll try it. Let me just say, je m'excuse pour la Boca 2029.
My name is Banti Kirimere of Mitsui. My question is to Mr. Mwangi. This morning we heard from Minister Alwendo about how we need to talk about a move from supply considerations to securing offtake and financing structures. The projects you've mentioned, the 300 megawatts for green ammonia, that's a significant investment. So it'd be interesting to hear a bit more about how those projects were made bankable, long-term offtake agreements in place, and are they commercially viable? Is the price of green ammonia actually competitive against alternative sources in Kenya?
And to the lady over here.
Another one from Mwangi.
Thanks. Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Victoria, and I represent the German Association of the Automotive Industry. We have a project with the Pan-African Association, AAAM, and we support the sustainable development of the auto industry on the continent. So first I have a small comment. I want to congratulate you because you have a Pan-African vision, and that's very important because we also think and want to act Pan-African because we want to manufacture on the continent for the continent? And then my request and my question to Joyce, because there's so many government representatives on the stage, is policy development. Because for us as an industry, it's always important to have the policy framework, and Namibia already said standardization is key, which it is. So I just want to know, Joyce, how do you, in what scope do you support the members of your alliance in a policy development on the continent? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And the lady right next to you wanted a question. I know it's an addition, but I think we'll use the question and answer to close the session as well. Please.
Thank you very much. My name is Johanna Thun. I'm from the German delegation. I have a lot of questions, but I'm just going to use one of them. Seeing that there's a lot of potential projects emerging, there's a lot of investment, especially in Namibia, South Africa, and many other countries in Africa, for green hydrogen. How do you, as an alliance, ensure that the potential huge supply that is there doesn't result in a drop of price when there's a lot of demand but not a lot of supply? How do you as an alliance address this issue and also ensure that the greenness of green hydrogen is actually really ensured, also involving sustainability standards, community involvement, and no negative benefits for the communities?
Thank you very much. So what I'm going to ask the panelists to do, if you could please also deal with the questions posed to you. I'll give about a minute and a half each. I know it's not a lot of time, but just so that we can wrap the session, if you can just deal with the questions. We'll start with you, Masopa, and then we'll move to you, Lachib, and we'll have final comments from you, James and Eric.
Great. Thank you very much for the questions. So the first one is, even though we are each having sort of large green hydrogen generation potential, our niches are slightly different. South Africa has a large industrial base and therefore has the potential to be a large consumer of green hydrogen. We see almost a 40-60 split between domestic consumption and exports. Though we do anticipate that exports will lead given the existing price premium. In that sense, we are happy to explore and are encouraged by the drop in the price of green hydrogen, because I think at this point it is very niche because of the price premium associated with it. But we do anticipate as these large-scale projects develop and we take advantage of economies of scale and drive up elements of production, that the price point will come down, and we feel that will be to the benefit of producers and consumers. You know, from a perspective of sort of do we divvy up the market among ourselves? No, we don't. I wish we had the power to do that, but it's really driven by our inherent advantages. Namibia has sparsely populated, enormous country with huge renewable energy potential. Kenya, on the other side of the continent, a very green energy mix, large agricultural potential, and an importer of fertilizers and the opportunity to green some of those value chains. Our brothers and sisters to the north have a proximity to Europe and therefore the ability to potentially have pipelines that supply green hydrogen into southern Europe. So our entry points into each of these markets are slightly different. The South African one, and I think it speaks to sort of the intention of all of us, is to try and beneficiate this green energy source in the country as much as possible, even if it is to produce value-added products for the export market. Maybe the last point that I'd like to add is very much looking forward to the Southern African Green Hydrogen Summit in Windhoek next year. I know James is going to knock our socks off, and I can take a break for a year.
Exactly. You just want me to do
Lachib, would you like to respond to the question first?
So if I can add some comment about some of these questions. For example, the question of the price. We have to be realistically, even today, before starting the production, no one knows the price of the hydrogen. Maybe ammonia, we have some understanding about ammonia, but no one understands the behavior of the market. And it's one of the uncertainty. It's not only the one, but one of the uncertainty in the market. And we are enthusiastic about the project. Our developers are enthusiastic, but we know this is one of the elements that no one can control, but everyone try to help. And mainly the big demand center are trying to create that kind of demand, stability of price, and all that aspect. But it's something that not yet clear how it can can work for this project. In terms of green hydrogen from Africa to Africa, I am totally aligned with my colleague from South Africa, because it's depend. If you are in Mauritania, for example, there is no big center of demand around you. But maybe Europe is the main market. It's not far. Internally, we hope that we will use some of this hydrogen to produce DRI, because we have co-located iron with the renewable energy, but the amount of renewable energy is exceeding by very much the capacity of DRI and the consumption of DRI in the country. So that's why the narrative is different than, for example, in Namibia, where you have a market just beside you. You can use it to integrate with it. So this is some of the element that I want to add for this question.
Joyce?
Yeah, could start by answering the gentleman on ESG, and if we have a common position as Africa. No, we don't, and that colleagues have spoken to that about the unique country profiles and priorities, and also still defining the roadmaps for different countries. So we are not yet there, but it's really sharing these lessons and picking the ones that work for the different contexts. For policies, how the alliance supports, then there will be the frameworks or the guidelines, we can call it a template, that's provided, that then countries can adopt. We also ran several sessions on, for instance, pulling the IRA and how some of the incentives in these policies and how other African countries can then adopt some of these other ideas. So we do that practically, but we also do plan to do quite a bit of capacity building on at a country level, putting into consideration the unique profiles and the unique needs and requirements. So, but we need resources for that, which we currently don't have, but that's the plan, to have it very targeted. But we do have quite a bit of support and partners who are supporting this work, such as AFDB, the World Bank, we have H2 Diplo, so, and GIZ as well, so that are also supporting members of the Alliance for policy support. In terms of the alliance growing, Nicholas, we are anticipating to have Djibouti, Tunisia, and Nigeria join the alliance, because there's also quite a criteria that countries need to have met to join the alliance. As much as it's not treaty-based, it's really voluntary that countries are joining. So yes, it's growing, and there are other countries that you would like us to approach and start conversations, then we can do that as well, because at least we want countries that already have an ambition, at least defined or are on their way to that. They are working on country strategies or roadmaps. They've started negotiations with the private sector. So at least there's a criteria that needs to be met. Mm-hmm. And also the chairing is rotational. And now we have South Africa chairing the alliance. So yeah, happy to have a chat on that.
But we have already included Angola and...
yes,
Angola
and Ethiopia joined.
Yeah.
James, can I just have your closing comments in about a minute, please?
I'm going to try and be open and controversial maybe in my closing a little bit. Colleagues, the supply side is responding. Yeah, we want to produce these molecules. We have a pretty good idea what the price of these initial molecules are going to be. If you're green hydrogen, it's north of $5-6 more. If you're producing green ammonia, it's 600 plus. Gray hydrogen, $2 sub. Gray ammonia, 300, 400 sub. Yeah, so you're looking at, if you're looking at ammonia, $300 to $500 a differential a ton. Yeah, so the premium we know is there. The key is supply side is going to produce this. Where is the demand side commitment? So the buyers and the policymakers need to then say, great, We've been talking about a just energy transition for a long time. We've been talking about $100 billion that needs to come from the global north to the global south. It's really now time to start to put these commitments down in writing. From my side, a controversial thing that's happening today is the developed nations are using their wealth to write subsidies essentially for local production of green hydrogen, even though their renewable energy endowments and a lot of their ESG components may be subpar to the suppliers. So they're essentially taking the market away from Kenya to the US. That's what the IRA is doing. We know they need to decarbonize as well. But we need to start coming up with these global offtake support mechanisms. So price differential mechanisms that are actually going to the supply markets as a form of, right, the $100 billion coming from the global south. Because let's be honest, the reason a lot of the developed nations can afford to do that is because they have exploited carbon sources before to industrialize. America is the largest producer of oil today. Europe continues to produce oil and gas today. And they're using that wealth to write really, really healthy subsidies for themselves. Kenya, Namibia, Mauritania, we can't afford those subsidies. So I think that's really where the rubber will hit the road. And this is something we would love to really start talking about in earnest and in detail at COP28, Global Gateway. To give you an example as a handoff to my colleague from Kenya, you know, Namibia wants to produce 2 million tons of ammonia. If that ammonia is priced at a price differential of 500, that's $1 billion a year of subsidies that would need to be provided for 10 to 15 years to pay back just the debt. We've modeled all that already. $1 billion a year, just for the one country.
So, do you want to take it and run with it in a minute?
Yeah. So I think there was a question about bankability of the 300 megawatts. As I said, it's a privately funded project. It's a subsidiary of a global listed firm that comes from a mining background, but is building a global green hydrogen business. And initially, actually, the plan was to export green hydrogen, but there was a request to kind of look at the domestic fertilizer market and perhaps supply into that to try and basically do a bit of import substitution. But if you talk about how do you make that project bankable, you know, I think again because of Kenya's unique characteristics, the price of fertilizer makes it viable at even $700-800 a ton, and it looks like it's gonna land somewhere between $500 and $600. So there is a domestic use case that makes green ammonia viable today. Now, of course, if you scale that up, I think I saw there's a project in Chile that's doing $600, and it's a subscale project. It's 10 megawatts of 4 cents solar. So it suggests that you can get to a $400, $500 production cost. But I completely agree with James that the idea is not to sell low cost, power to X products, whether it's ammonia or synthetic fuel. And I'll give you the example of e-methanol because, e-methanol is being seen as the real sustainable marine fuel of the future. If that's the case, and we're already seeing, I think Mola Musk shipped their first production vessel that's running entirely on e-methanol earlier this year. Now, the difference in price between e-methanol, which is about $1,500, and marine fuel today, $300-400, is massive. Now, in terms of the cost to the shipping, it is a massive jump. But if you look at it as a fraction of the cost of products that are shipped to wherever they go, it's not much. And so that that transfer of, because it's effectively an economic transfer, it's a transfer of wealth that should be going to the producers of renewables today, for going the low carbon route of industrialization. So,
right.
so that value should be captured on the continent.
Right, thank you so much. Let me just thank my panelists, Eric Mwangi, Office of the President in Kenya, and thank you very much to James Mnyupe, Hydrogen Commissioner, also Office of the President in Namibia. Thank you very much to Joyce Kabui, who is with the Africa Green Hydrogen Alliance. Thank you very much. Krumbali Lekhrib, who is advisor in the Office of the Ministry of Petroleum, Mines and Energy in Mauritania. And thank you very much to Mr. Masopa Moshweshwe, Office of the Presidency in South Africa. I think they deserve a warm round of applause. Interesting discussion.
Thank you.
So that's it from us. There is an exhibition coffee break. The next round of sessions starts at 15:15. Thank you so much for joining us in this discussion. Please enjoy the rest of the summit. Whew.